Good morning, Marla. Thanks for being our guest today on Voices in Motion. Now let's get right to the questions. Today's first question is from a regular listener in Nashville. Bethany would like to know which amendment to the U.S. Constitution was used in deciding Roe v. Wade in the 1973 case.
Good morning, Andy, and thank you for the invitation to join your discussion on the topic of the reversal of the 50-year precedence of a woman's right to an abortion based on the advice and consultation of her medical team. The legal basis for the ruling that a woman's right to abortion is guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution stems from the landmark Supreme Court case Roe v. Wade, decided in 1973. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that a woman's right to choose to have an abortion is protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees the right to privacy. The impact of this ruling on the lives of everyday women and their families has been significant. Prior to Roe v. Wade, abortion laws varied widely across states, with many states radically restricting or outright banning the procedure. This often meant that women who sought abortions faced significant obstacles, including having to travel long distances, seek illegal and potentially unsafe procedures, or carry unwanted pregnancies to term. With the legalization of abortion nationwide, women gained the ability to make reproductive choices based on their own circumstances and beliefs, without facing criminalization or stigma. This decision has allowed women to have greater control over their bodies and reproductive futures, enabling them to pursue education, careers, and other life goals on their own terms. Additionally, Roe v. Wade has had implications beyond individual women, impacting families, communities, and society as a whole. By allowing women to make decisions about when and if to have children, the ruling has contributed to greater economic stability and autonomy for families. It has also been a focal point in debates over women's rights, reproductive health care, and the role of government in regulating personal decisions.
John in Michigan would like to know what the reversal of Roe v. Wade means for other historical rights that have been granted to Americans based on the 14th Amendment.
As of 2022, the overturning of Roe v. Wade has profound implications for other rights granted to Americans based on the 14th Amendment. This landmark decision had established the right to privacy and reproductive autonomy under its Due Process Clause, setting a precedent for various other rights grounded in similar constitutional principles. With the reversal of Roe v. Wade, the legal foundation for protecting the right to privacy and bodily autonomy is significantly weakened. This could potentially undermine the protection of other rights that have relied on similar constitutional interpretations. For instance, decisions such as Griswold v. Connecticut, 1965, which established the right to contraception, drew upon the same privacy rights recognized in Roe v. Wade. Without the protection afforded by Roe, the legal basis for such decisions may become more vulnerable. Moreover, the principle of equal protection under the law, also derived from the 14th Amendment, could be at risk. The right to abortion has been integral to women's ability to pursue equal opportunities and control over their bodies and lives. Its reversal signals a retreat from this understanding of equality, potentially affecting other areas of law where equal protection is at stake. In essence, the overturning of Roe v. Wade has far-reaching consequences beyond abortion rights, potentially reshaping the legal landscape surrounding various other rights and liberties that Americans hold dear.
Now we have a question from Bertie in Salt Lake City. Is Obergefell the same case that Justice Clarence Thomas wants to revisit because he felt it was wrongfully decided in 2015? And if so, wouldn't revisiting this case open the floodgates to other previous rulings past courts have used to expand access to the American dream?
In Obergefell v. Hodges, a landmark decision legalized same-sex marriage nationwide by holding that the fundamental right to marry is protected by the Due Process and Equal Protection Clauses of the 14th Amendment. Reversing or undermining this ruling could affect the rights of LGBTQ+ individuals to marry and access the legal benefits and protections associated with marriage. And yes, the weakening of the Due Process and Equal Protection Clauses of the 14th Amendment pose a great risk to most, if not all, rights that were based on these clauses throughout history.
Marla, I have a question from Doug in San Antonio. Doug wants to know which Supreme Court rulings are at most risk of being reversed by the current court if it continues down this path of overturning established law.
If the current Supreme Court continues down the path of overturning established law based on the principles applied in the reversal of Roe v. Wade in 2022, several other landmark rulings could potentially be at risk of being reversed or significantly undermined. Some of these rulings are closely tied to similar constitutional principles and have been pivotal in shaping American jurisprudence. Here are a few examples. Planned Parenthood v. Casey in 1992. This decision reaffirmed the essential holdings of Roe v. Wade but allowed for greater state regulation of abortion. The principles established in Planned Parenthood v. Casey, particularly regarding the undue burden standard, have been fundamental in subsequent abortion-related cases. Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, the legal reasoning behind Planned Parenthood v. Casey could also be called into question, potentially allowing for further restrictions on abortion rights. Let's take a look at the court decision in the case of Lawrence v. Texas, 2003. In this case, the Supreme Court struck down Texas's sodomy law, holding that intimate consensual sexual conduct is protected by the substantive due process clause of the 14th Amendment. The ruling invalidated laws criminalizing same-sex sexual activity and affirmed the right to sexual privacy. If the court adopts a narrower view of substantive due process rights, as evidenced by the reversal of Roe v. Wade, Lawrence v. Texas could be vulnerable to challenge. Another case that could hinge on unprecedented review of the 14th Amendment application is Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. In this landmark decision, state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students was declared to be unconstitutional, and was pivotal in overturning the separate but equal doctrine established in Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896. While Brown v. Board of Education is widely considered a foundational ruling in the fight against racial segregation, the principles of judicial restraint and respect for precedent that underpin Roe v. Wade's reversal could potentially lead to challenges to Brown's continuing validity. Miranda v. Arizona, 1966. This ruling established the requirement for law enforcement to inform criminal suspects of their rights before questioning, famously known as the Miranda rights. While not directly tied to reproductive rights or privacy, the principles of Miranda v. Arizona, particularly regarding the protection of individual rights against government overreach, could face scrutiny if the court adopts a more restrictive approach to constitutional interpretation. These are just a few examples of landmark Supreme Court rulings that could be at risk if the current court continues to overturn established law based on the principles observed in the reversal of Roe v. Wade. The extent to which these decisions might be challenged or overturned depends on various factors, including the composition of the court, evolving legal doctrines, and broader societal shifts.
And in closing out our discussion today, please summarize what the future holds for these specific rights, and possibly others, over the next decade. And secondly, what can ordinary Americans do to try to offset the effects of a court that ignores precedent when it finds it expedient to achieve a certain outcome?
Looking ahead to the next decade, the future of specific rights such as reproductive rights, LGBTQ+ rights, racial equality, and individual liberties will face uncertainty, particularly in light of a Supreme Court that demonstrates a willingness to overturn established precedent. The potential for further erosion or reinterpretation of these rights depends on various factors, including shifts in the court's composition, evolving legal doctrines, and broader societal attitudes. For reproductive rights, the reversal of Roe v. Wade has already led to increased state-level restrictions on abortion access, resulting in a patchwork of laws across the country where access to reproductive health care varies widely. Similarly, LGBTQ+ rights may face challenges as courts revisit decisions such as Obergefell v. Hodges, potentially allowing for greater state-level regulation or even the reversal of marriage equality laws altogether. In terms of racial equality, the principles established in cases like Brown v. Board of Education could face renewed scrutiny, potentially leading to challenges to affirmative action programs and other efforts to address systemic discrimination. Additionally, individual liberties, including privacy rights and protections against government overreach as outlined in rulings like Miranda v. Arizona and Lawrence v. Texas, may be subject to reinterpretation or narrowing, impacting civil liberties more broadly. To offset the effects of a court that ignores precedent for expedient outcomes, ordinary Americans can take a variety of actions. I believe that the primary action that every person concerned about judicial overreach of the courts is to simply vote in local, state, and federal elections. Support candidates who prioritize protecting civil liberties and upholding the rule of law. Additionally, promote electoral reforms that promote fairness and accountability in the judicial selection process. The second most effective means of fighting back an overactive court is to have conversations with your family, friends, and your community about the importance of preserving civil liberties and constitutional protections. Educate others about the potential consequences of judicial decisions that undermine established precedent and actively promote robust discussions about how to preserve the rule of law. Third is engaging in civic life. Stay informed about judicial nominations and appointments, as well as potential cases that may impact fundamental rights. Engage in advocacy efforts to support candidates and policies that align with principles of justice, equality, and individual freedoms. Also, individuals must support organizations and legal initiatives that defend civil liberties and reproductive rights through litigation and advocacy. Consider volunteering or providing financial support to organizations that work to uphold constitutional rights. And lastly, organize and participate in grassroots efforts within your community to raise awareness about the importance of judicial independence and the protection of constitutional rights. Build coalitions with like-minded individuals and organizations to amplify your voices, convince others, and work toward change. By engaging in these efforts, ordinary Americans can help safeguard fundamental rights and promote a more just and equitable society, even in the face of challenges posed by a judiciary that may disregard precedent for ideological reasons.
Voices in Motion podcast would like to thank our guest, listeners, and panel of questioners that participated today. Remember, consolidation of power does not happen in a vacuum. It happens when comfortable, complacent people willfully and submissively choose to relinquish their own power. Don't be that person. Once again, thanks to our supporters who make this podcast possible.